Hello, and welcome to the third episode of The Lion's Den. I'm your host, Ron Garrett. I'm an atheist with the peculiar hobby of trying to understand points of view that I don't agree with. I'm also a former NASA AI researcher with a PhD in computer science. My guest today is Chris Fisher. Chris Fisher, who is one of the intellectual leaders of a branch of Christianity called Open Theism. Chris is an author, having written 2 books about open theism and a blog at realityisnotoptional.com. and is the lead editor at godisopen.com. He graduated from the University of South Dakota with honors in 2006, with a dual major in computer science and political science and minors in mathematics and economics. His honors thesis was entitled The Hellenization of Christianity, a Defense of Open Theism, which I have to say is a surprising topic for someone studying computer science and political science and math and economics. So Chris, thank you for joining me. I really wanted to talk to you because you and I have something in common, and that is that we have both debated Matt Slick.
Oh, have you watched my debate with Matt Slick?
I watched part of your debate, not the whole thing, but I have to say I enjoyed it immensely because the other thing that you and I have in common is that we both vehemently disagree with Matt Slick. For those of you in the audience who don't know him, Matt is a Calvinist. And a regular on the YouTube debate circuit. I first encountered Calvinism about 20 years ago when I decided to step up to the mic and debate a street preacher in Santa Monica, California. And the more I learned about it, the more bizarre their doctrine seemed to me. Again, for the benefit of those of you in the audience who might not be familiar with it, Calvinism holds that because God knows everything, he must therefore know exactly what everyone is going to do. And yet somehow we still have free will to choose to sin or not. That seems like a logical contradiction to me. One of the logical prerequisites of free will is that no one, not even God, can possibly know what I'm going to do before I've actually made a decision. And open theism, as I understand it, agrees with that and resolves the contradiction by saying that God doesn't know the future. That really surprised me when I learned about it because I'd done a fair bit of reading up on this. And as far as I could tell, Christianity split into 2 camps, the Calvinists on one hand and the Arminians. But even the Arminians say that God is omniscient. And so that never made any sense to me either. But open theism makes sense to me. It seems to me more intellectually honest to say that, yeah, God doesn't know the future because that is consistent with both logic and a plain reading of the text of the Bible. But that leads you to some very interesting and to me unexplored theological territory. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about here today. So I'd like to start by just reading an excerpt from your book. I bought you sent me an electronic copy. I bought a hard copy and I realized after it was delivered that I bought the wrong one, that you'd read more than one. So this is actually not the book that I'm about to read the excerpt from. This is your other book. I'm just really impressed that you actually managed to write 2 of them. It's self-published, but it reads like a legitimate work of scholarship. It's got references.
So like when I reread my old work, I'm like, wow, this is actually really good. It's like, I sometimes impress myself because, sometimes you like forget things and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good point too. How fantastic.
I read a lot of my old research and I cringe, but anyway, so I wanted to read something from chapter 1 of your other book. And it's the section is called The Nature and Character of Yahweh. Within the Hebrew Bible, Yahweh is a person. Yahweh has personality and characteristics. The reader can sympathize with his story, both feeling his feelings and understanding his thoughts. The reader is invited to grow along with God in a developing narrative. Yahweh is introduced to the reader during creation. In this account, Yahweh innovates a new creation, man. Yahweh is curious about this creature. He brings animals to his new creation to see what he would call them. This curiosity soon turns to punishment as man violates the one rule they are given. Man, who was empowered by Yahweh to have dominance over the entire earth, is expelled from man's birthplace. Yahweh then seeks to eternally bar man from accessing this land by establishing guardians at the gates. The narrative can be taken in many ways. It could be historical, mythological, polemical, or a combination of all of these genres. Now, there's more interesting stuff after that, but I wanted to stop there. I say that I was really surprised to find a Christian apologist explicitly acknowledging that the Bible could be mythological. Now, you don't actually believe that the Bible is mythological, right?
Okay, so
You're a young Earth creationist. You believe in Noah's Ark, but you're not a flat earther.
Right.
So I want to understand how you get from explicitly acknowledging the possibility that the Bible could be mythological to rejecting that possibility and concluding that it's actually true. So walk me through it.
Okay, so you have to look at what you're reading, and you have to try to put yourself in the mindset of the writer. What is the writer trying to communicate to the audience? Is the author trying to communicate literal history? And so we'll take the book of Job, for example. The book of Job, my favorite book of the Bible. It's set in this land that's not specifically Hebrew, not specifically ancient Near East. And what it does is it tells the tale of a man who's punished through no fault of his own and goes through all this pain and suffering that's a person unique to himself. And so is this to be taken historically? Was it meant to the original readers to be taken historically? What were they supposed to get from this? What is the thing being communicated? And so you could walk away. You could still take the Bible a sola scriptura. You could take the Bible as divinely inspired, as infallible, or whatever, and still understand that certain sections of the Bible talk idiomatically. They talk in either myth or personification or extended metaphors. When the Proverbs talk about wisdom was with God when creating the earth.
So which category do you think Job falls into?
I think that Job is likely meant to be based off a historical figure, but I think it's trying to communicate something deeper to the audience.
Okay, so the historicity of Job is not essential to its purpose. Is that a fair assessment?
Right.
Okay.
And so, like, for example, the dialogue, like, there's probably not someone there writing down any dialogue that ever happened with a potential historical figure or anything like that. Probably people are embellishing, and they're embellishing for specific points. And so each of the friends have different angles that are being explored, and they're being explored in a very literary way to try to communicate different points of view to the audience, and then one by one taking down those points of views.
Okay.
And so if that makes sense.
No, that makes absolutely perfect sense. But when I listen to that, I'm still thinking, okay, but all this still fits within a framework where the Bible is a work of fiction intended to communicate something more than just a literal story. It's intended to convey life lessons and a worldview, but it's still fiction. It's still mythology. But you don't believe that. And the interesting thing to me is
what's the genre?
To me, the genre is mythology. It clearly looks like mythology to me, but it doesn't to you. But it's interesting to me because you've said that the historicity of Job, explicitly just now acknowledged that the historicity of Job doesn't really matter. So even if it is mythology, it's still serving its purpose. But how do you now distinguish between Job being possibly mythology still serving its purpose and Genesis that you now have to take literally in order to get to your young earth creationism?
So again, to be an open theist, to be a Christian, to be a sola scriptura, you don't have to take Genesis as historical.
Okay.
We'll get, so that's just that the historicity of Genesis is something that I'm coming to unaffiliated with open theism.
Okay. So that's a separate topic, which I still would want to talk to you about, but we can put a pin in that for now.
Yeah, there's old earth open theists, there's young earth open theists, there's old earth sola scriptura type Bible infallible old earth, and there's the same for the young earth.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily a topic that's relevant to open theism. And so there's ways that people could treat the text.
Okay, that's fine. So let's put that aside for now. And let me ask you then, just strictly from the point of view of open theism, one of the implications of that is that God makes mistakes, right?
Well, what would you consider a mistake? And so let's take the creation of man.
Mhm.
Um, God creates man. God is expecting mankind to be with him, sojourn with him, relate to him. He's watching the earth. In Genesis 6, the earth becomes wicked.
Mhm.
And so in Genesis 6, you have a very interesting um, sentence in which God looks down, he sees the wickedness of man, and then he says, I regret. What does he regret? Does it say, oh, I regret that man has become so wicked? No, he doesn't regret that at all. He says, I regret creating man. And so he is, in
Genesis
retrospective,
Genesis 6:6, and it repenteth the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart.
right.
That's the
And
King James.
yeah, so what repents God? It's his own action in creation. So
Mhm.
basically what he's saying is if I were to have done it all over again, I wouldn't have done it.
Well,
So
that sounds like a
Genesis,
mistake to me. That sounds
well,
like God saying, wow, I
it,
really
it,
screwed the pooch.
if you call a mistake, that's your prerogative.
Do you disagree with that characterization?
God attempts to there's a second redo in creation, and so he wipes out Earth and then tries to reestablish it again. And so it's not like a
And
complete
screws up
regret.
again.
Yeah, yes, actually. And so he recreates the earth, yeah, creates a new bloodline, and that itself fails. And so then he attempts to
So
reach
he's 0 for
earth.
2.
Oh for 2. He attempts to recreate his relationship with mankind through a particular people group, a priest nation. This fails. And so we read in Romans, Paul's talking about this, how now the Jews are being cut off and the Gentiles are grafted in. So he keeps trying new things in order to reach mankind. And so the regret is not necessarily I made a mistake, but you can call it a mistake. It seems like a mistake, and it's fine if you want to label it as a mistake.
Is that at
But
all unfair to call it
uh,
a mistake?
it's not unfair. And
Okay.
so God is regretting his own actions. He himself considers himself culpable in some respect for the state of mankind. So it's like if you have children and your children turn out to be wicked and evil, it's not all your fault. It's not all the parents' fault. A lot of times kids, they have their own predispositions and things like that, but it's somewhat your fault if you raise a murderer, thief, psychopath, or something like that. It is a little bit the parents' fault. And so what we see in Genesis 6, and it goes on, you read the narrator portion, it goes on to a first person monologue in the next verse. It says, so the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing and birds of the air, for I am sorry. And this is Nakam, he's repenting. I repent that I have made them. He's blaming himself. So in some way, he's considering himself culpable for the sin that is on earth.
By the way,
He's
that
at a
always
fault.
seemed a little odd to me too, that he would destroy all the animals because man has become wicked. Why
I
not
think that,
just kill the humans?
well, it says that all the earth, both man and beast, that all the evils coming from all these things. And so it seems to be just a complete reset. There's actually, if you read David Klein's, he has a article on this called "The Failure of the Flood," and you actually have my book right there that talks about Genesis 6
This one?
in yep
Okay.
in fairly good detail. And so it references this failure of the flood by David Klein's. He says there's a hidden repentance. There's two repentances that are in this narrative. The first repentance is that God repents of making man. He resolves to destroy all of mankind. Then there's a second repentance. Then he discovers Noah. He discovers that he's perfect in his generations or whatnot, and then resolves to save a certain subsection of man alive. So you move from one extreme and get another repentance from that extreme to a lesser degree. And so that it's kind of hidden in the narrative, but it's there.
Okay. So, given that God makes mistakes, what is the basis for trusting him?
Well, you're married. Are you married?
I am.
Do you trust your wife?
Yes.
Does she ever make mistakes?
Yes.
Okay. That's
Maybe I should be careful what I say here.
well, yeah, we trust people based on their character and their personality. We don't have this weird standard like the Calvinists will do this. We're like, oh no, now we lost our assurance in salvation, and we might go to like as if they don't believe in people being fake regenerated, anyways. But they always impose this weird, crazy standard of trust that we don't actually encounter in our daily lives. It's like.
Okay.
We trust people. People make mistakes. People are fallible. We trust people based on who they are, their character, their personality.
Okay. So, but there's still the possibility that God could say, do X and Y and Z, and it would be legitimate to say, that seems a little weird to me. Are you sure? Maybe I should be pushing back on you a little. And I want to actually cite you two specific. Yeah, no. So there's Exodus 32 where exactly that happens, where God says to Moses, I'm going to kill all the Israelites.
Right.
Yet again, because
and he should have. He should have. In retrospect, that would have been a good idea.
Well, we can argue about that, but the point is that Moses pushes back and talks God out of it. And again, God says he repented of the evil that he thought to do unto his people.
God often goes against his better judgment in order to implement what his creation wants and prays for.
Okay.
So just because you see a repentance in Exodus 32 of wanting to destroy them doesn't mean that was the best thing God could have done. And so you see this in Samuel when the people reject God. So God was supposed to be the king. The people reject God. They say, no, we want an actual king. And so in Samuel, God gives in to the people's wishes. And he says, hey, Samuel, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. But we're going to give them a king anyways. Because God, against his better judgment, does things for the sake of his people. And so you see that in Exodus. God is going against what he wants to do due to the petitions, due to the intervention of someone whose opinion he cares about.
Okay, that's interesting. So let me ask you about another famous episode in the Bible, Abraham and Isaac.
Yeah.
I've gotten lots of interesting responses to this. The most interesting one is that that Abraham failed, that God asking Abraham to sacrifice Isaac was a test. And
that's how it starts.
In actually going through with it, Abraham failed the test.
No.
No? Okay.
No. So what is the test designed to do? The test is designed to see who Abraham values. Does he value God and God's power and his relationship with God over his only real son, the son with his natural wife? He has another kid, but it's his only true son. Does he value his relationship enough to sacrifice and trust in God what he sees as his only link to this future that he's promised?
Okay. But we just now established that there are times when it's legitimate to say to God, are you sure about that? Maybe I should be pushing back on this. And surely if God is telling you to kill not just another innocent human being, but your own child, mm-hmm. if that's not an occasion to push back, what is?
Well, our criticism, I guess, is with Abraham. Like, why didn't he do that? He does push back in Genesis 18 about Sodom and Gomorrah. God is going to destroy all of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then he starts arguing with God, and he's trying to push God to his limits of righteousness and almost accuse God of being unrighteous if God is willing to have a certain number of righteous people as collateral damage for destroying a wicked city. And he's able to argue God down from 50 down to 10. And guess what? They go to the city. 10 is not found. The city's not spared, but God evacuates Lot and Lot's family is spared on account of Lot. That's the Bible states that in various places, that it's like his family is being saved because Lot is the righteous man. And
Okay.
so they're saved on account of him. He evacuates them and then destroys the city. But God was going to just destroy the city with any potential righteous people inside of that.
Sure.
And then he's given a different standard of righteousness, or a higher standard of for collateral damage allowances.
Right. So sometimes people push back, and that seems to be the right thing to do. And sometimes they don't push back, and you're saying that that's also the right thing to do.
Okay, so
how do we know? I mean, what lesson am I supposed to actually draw from this?
well, what is trying to be communicated by these various passages? What is it supposed to tell us? It tells us a little bit about God's character, that God listens to us and cares about what we want and we desire and the way we see things. It's not this Calvinist controlling God who needs to micromanage every time that we fart or something like that. It's nothing like that. It's a give and take type of relationship. It's a Susan Tree type covenant in which you have a superior and a subordinate, but they have interlocking concerns and desires, and one matters to each other.
But it's still a God that makes mistakes. So what's the lesson that I should be taking from this in terms of how I should respond when God calls on me to do something that seems like a mistake to me?
Is God calling on you to do things?
Well, obviously not. If he were, we'd be having a very different conversation, right?
So what
I have sought God since I was 12 years old, and I had a brief conversion experience at a YMCA summer camp, and I was deconverted very quickly thereafter when I actually started. When my dad said, I came home, told my parents that I was a Christian, and my dad, to his credit, did not freak out, but he handed me a Bible and said, "Here, you should read this." And I started reading it, and within a couple of days, I was deconverted because things just didn't make sense.
Okay,
and
so
it especially did not make sense in the context of what I had been told at the summer camp, which was in Kentucky, and so they were all Southern Baptists, and so they were telling me God is perfect and he never makes mistakes, and all the things that Southern Baptists tell you.
Yeah. Okay. So my oldest son had cancer, and he got cancer when he was 6 years old. And it was a cancer that, like, we couldn't detect it in his blood. All his white counts were normal and things like that. It was pretty aggressive form of leukemia, T-cell leukemia. And so we all poured out our prayers. Like often in the Bible, like you start reading through the Psalms, the people and how they pray to God, there's bargaining going on. There's appealing to God's interests. So King David, when he's praying to God, he says, "God, I'm at the verge of death. If you let me die here, guess what? There's no praise for you in the grave when I'm dead. You're going to be foregoing our relationship. You're going to be foregoing my praise. You're going to be materially harmed by my death." He's giving God incentives, bargaining with God. Oftentimes you'll see people calling out God for shirking his duties if he doesn't save the righteous and punish the wicked, things like that. These types of prayers. My son's in remission, and so he's now 18. Kind of scary. He's getting out on his own these days, but his aggressive form of cancer went away and was healed. And so God can respond to prayers, and does it always turn out the best in the end? You take Hezekiah, who was on the verge of death. God increased his lifespan. He prays to God, and God had told him he is going to die. He prays to God, and God decides, okay, I'm going to give you like 14 more years. I don't know the exact number offhand. But then what happens? He turns out to be a bad king. That the life extension seems to be a mistake. He did a lot of bad things that just wouldn't have been done in retrospective if he had just died. So I don't know. Maybe my son turns out he's a very good kid, and he's a very low aggression, honor student, full ride scholarship kid. Maybe he turns out to be like the worst thing in the world. Probably not. Probably not. He's a good kid.
Sure that won't happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. But there's possibilities, and so the Bible understands that there are risks in this world, and there's a very good book by a non-open theist called it's what is it? Wild at Heart. Okay, so there's a very good book by maybe open theist. He claims he's not an open theist, called Wild at Heart, and it's how God in creation takes risks, and these risks are going to be inherent in creation. Like creating man, you have a risk of them rebelling. Having children, you and I, we have a risk of them turning out bad. We have a risk of heartbreak. It's just inherent in the structure of the universe. And you get a sense that this is how the world of the biblical authors, how it operates. And so in Jeremiah 18, when God is explaining to people his standard operating procedures, he tells us flat out, when circumstances change, I have the right to change my mind. If I'm taking my kids to McDonald's and they start whining in the car, even if I told them earlier in the day, hey kids, I'm going to take you to McDonald's, we put them all in the car, we start driving there, they all start being whiny, I turn the car around. Did I lie to them about taking them to McDonald's? I wouldn't call that a lie. But I have the prerogative to change my mind because circumstances changed. I'm no longer bound to what I said before. And so God says, if there's a nation and that nation is good and I declare blessings, and if it turns from it, I'm not going to do what I said I was going to do. And if there's a wicked nation that I'm going to destroy and then they become good, think Nineveh and Jonah, then I'm not going to do what I thought I was going to do. So God, and this should be common sense to us, when circumstances change, we reevaluate based on changing circumstances, and this is how God in the Bible operates. It's not.
I don't see how that is answering the question that I asked.
How do we function?
No. How can we tell whether, when God calls on us to do something, whether that or not that's a situation where we should be pushing back or just obeying?
We just use our own common sense, or like you don't want to kill your own kid, like push back on that. Ezekiel, when he's told to cook his food,
but Abraham did the exact opposite. He didn't push back.
Right, that's your criticism.
And you said that was the right thing to do.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh well, it's okay. So let me achieve clarity on this. I said that some people had expressed the opinion that it was a test and Abraham failed the test because he didn't push back.
Yeah, I don't
think
God
was looking for was for him to push back.
No, I don't think God was looking for him to push back at all, but I don't think it would have been wrong for him to push back. Oh. I think the test was explicitly what happened and how he passed. I think that's what God was expecting.
So does God expect blind obedience or not?
I don't think God does. A lot of people push back with God throughout the Bible. There's a very good book by a Jewish scholar, Dov Weiss. I had him on my program, and he has a book called Pious Irreverence. And so basically it's a book that details fighting with God about morality within the Bible and the Talmud.
Okay.
And so
that's definitely, and I can definitely subscribe to that. I can definitely get on board with that. But it seems to me that the lesson of, if you just look at the story of Abraham and Isaac or the story of Job, as from a literary point of view, that the lesson that the author was intending their audience to take away was that blind obedience to God is a virtue.
It does not. No, that's not what's happening in Job. And so David Kleins, he wrote the Biblical Word Commentary on Job, and if you go into academia.edu, he's got a lot of articles on Job, including a very short summary where he just goes through all the verses and all the chapters, so it's like a quick read of all of Job. That's not what's happening in Job. There's an existential problem that God has to solve in Job. Whether or not mankind, without any gifts or incentives, can worship God. And once this question is solved, it's solved once and for all. So this is book about an existential problem for God that doesn't apply to any other human in history once the question is actually
So
solved.
let me review the story of Job just to make sure that I've got it right.
Right.
So Satan comes to God and says, people worship you only because you give them nice things.
Yeah.
And if you stop giving them nice things, they'd stop worshiping you.
Yeah.
And God says, no, they're worshiping me because they love me and I can prove it to you, and basically enters a bet. And decides to pick on this guy Job as his experimental subject and just starts wailing on him.
Yeah.
And Job starts to wonder, God, I've been worshiping you. Why are you suddenly wailing on me?
Yeah.
And God's answer is, I'm not going to tell you. Who are you to even ask such a question?
Mm-hmm.
And that feels to me like a demand for blind obedience, and well, not just blind obedience, but blind acceptance of even the most horrible fate.
But it's interesting because Job ends, and God wants to kill Job's friends, because Job's friends are all the Calvinists who are like, oh, this is happening to you because you got secret sin and God's controlling and doing all things. He says, your friends have not spoken about me what's right as you have. And so what did Job say about God that was correct? All of Job's statements is that God just does what he wants. Might makes right. There's nothing I could do. I can't push against this. This is entirely unjust. I'm just going to scream from the ground against this injustice. It was actual injustice against Job going on. He didn't deserve the whole point of the book of Job is he did not deserve the things that he was receiving from God. He was getting it unjustly, and that was his complaint.
So God is not always just.
Yeah, again, these are terminologies that we have, and we have they're when we add descriptors like these, it's our own evaluation, and our own evaluation could be good or bad. If you want to say God is unjust in this circumstance, I think that's a valid reading.
That's a fascinating concession. I mean, this is a problem that goes back to the Greeks, and there's this famous Plato dialogue called Euthyphro, where he asks, is it good because God wills it, or does God will it because it is good? Right. You know about this, right?
And so yes, but within the Bible, God is taken to task by his creation. And there is basically an implicit admission in the Bible that independent creatures can call God to task for God's action and inaction. Okay. Throughout the Psalms, God is accused of shirking his duties when God doesn't actually exercise control over the world in such a way to bring about retributive justice. Okay. So the book of
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's this. I won't let you finish, but there's a question I'm really dying to ask.
The book of Job is all about how retributive justice doesn't actually exist in this earth, and God does not have a duty to implement retributive justice. But within the rest of the Bible, God is called out for his inaction and not actually executing some sort of justice on earth. And so he's taken to task, and he's prompted into movement. It's based on people shaming him for inaction.
Okay. So I want to put that to the test right now, because I am calling God out for not revealing himself to me, to put it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But I want to be more explicit about that. It's not just that I've gone through life kind of passively expecting God to appear in front of me, right, in a big, on a white cloud with a white beard or something like that. I've been actively seeking him again since I was 12 years old. I've been studying theology and Christianity in particular, and my motivation for this was mainly to try to understand how I was growing up in the South, and so all of my peers were mostly Baptist, but there were some other denominations floating around, but overwhelmingly my peers were Baptists. And some of them tried to convert me, and it didn't work because it didn't make any sense to me. And so my challenge to God is, one of the things the Baptist told me is that God wants a relationship with me. He wants me to come to know him. Well, if he really wants this, he's not doing a very good job of reaching out to me. And it's not that I've rejected him. In fact, I've put quite a bit of effort into trying to find him and figure him out. And the overwhelming conclusion that I've come to, based on coming up on 50 years of study now, is that the Bible is mythology. There is no supernatural influence in the world at all, either God or anything else. No gods, no demons, no unicorns, no Santa Claus, no leprechauns, nothing like that, no UFOs. And I've come to this conclusion in good faith. So if that's wrong, then it seems to me that God has to bear some of the responsibility for that for two reasons. One is in not providing me the evidence that I would need in order to come to a different conclusion, but also in making me the way that I am, that I look at the evidence that he has provided me and I've come to this other conclusion. But according to you and other Christians, the net result of this is now I'm going to suffer eternal torment in the afterlife. And that seems unjust, unfair, short end of the stick. So how would you respond to that?
Well, your fears and considerations are not new. These are ancient. You said you read through the Bible. This is a common complaint in the Psalms, is God's absence. And so this is a core part of the Bible, is people struggling with God being inactive, non-present, not responding, allowing my daily prayer is the same one Jesus had, that your kingdom come, your will be done. I want God to come to earth and kill the wicked and bless the righteous as we were promised. And
it's worse than absence. In my case, it's much worse than absence. It is looking at the source of what is supposed to be God's word and finding there the exact opposite of what I would expect from God's word. Well, maybe not the exact opposite, but a lot of hinky shit. And I'll give you just one example, and I'll go from the Gospels. So I am told, one is told when one investigates this, that the Gospels are eyewitness accounts, and that is one of the things that makes them trustworthy. It turns out that's wrong. They're not eyewitness accounts. They're all anonymous. There's no claimed authorship, and there's some really weird shit in there. Like, and my favorite example is in Matthew. After the crucifixion, the saints rise from the graves and walk around Jerusalem. And that seems really weird for a couple of reasons. First of all, Matthew is the only one who records this event. So none of the other gospel authors thought that this was sufficiently worthy of note to write down. And the other is that no secular author ever recorded this event, which you would think that if dead people rose from the grave and walked around the city and a lot of people saw them, which Matthew also says was seen by many, that somebody would pay attention, would notice this and write it down. That would seem to be a pretty unusual event. And so, that's just kind of a head scratcher to me. So why would God put this head scratcher in his word without a way to resolve it? That just seems strange. If I were going to try to explain this theologically, it makes much more sense. It's much easier to understand if I hypothesize that the Bible was not the work of God, but of some kind of a trickster deity like Loki. He's my favorite deity. So I sometimes put my tongue in my cheek and say that I worship Loki, even though I don't really believe in him either.
Yeah.
The theory that the Bible was written by loci makes a lot more sense to me than that the Bible was written by a benevolent, trustworthy God with a capital G.
Yeah, so we don't actually have very much writings from that time period. Maybe you're expecting something found in Josephus. Who else is writing about that time period? Whose writings we have access to today?
We don't have many histories, but we have a lot of records from the time. So we have tax rolls and just lots of mundane stuff. So lots of people writing things down. And records of who's appointed to what office and what Roman official is traveling from here to there. There is a lot of stuff. And Josephus in particular has collected a lot of it. And a lot of what's in Josephus is not Josephus's original writings. It's other writings that he's collected. Like if you go to read Josephus, the very first thing you see is a recapitulation of Genesis,
which is fantastic. And so I write in my Hellenization of Christianity book, which you have a digital copy of, I talk about Josephus, and his recounting of Genesis is that God is like surprised by the human actions. And so when he's writing his history, he still has some open theistic tendencies. This is before he starts interacting with the Greeks, and later in life he starts adopting all the Greek attributes of God and then kind of starts changing his tune. And so I like Josephus in that he gives us like what a first century Pharisee, he was basically a Pharisee, first century Pharisee, how they would have viewed the Bible while reading it.
Sure. But the point is that if anyone wrote an account of dead people rising from the grave and walking around Jerusalem, it seems it's beyond my ability to suspend disbelief to think that Josephus did not come to his attention and that he didn't write it down, even if he didn't have firsthand knowledge of the event.
So you do have texts like, I don't think like absence of like something like that. You have all sorts of accounts all the time of people seeing dead people.
That's another reason why the absence of the account of this seeing of dead people is so unusual. I mean, yeah, it's an argument for silence, but it's silence about an event that really should have gotten people's attention.
Right. You do have things like Valesky's Age in Chaos, which he talks about basically mere events that are recorded in Egyptian history that kind of cover the plagues of Egypt. And so you are going to find some sort of a witness in secular documents for things like that. I just don't think that with the sparsity of actual historical accounts and narratives, especially in this realm, that you can make a very specific claim about what Matthew is writing.
Well, I'm not making a specific claim. I'm just saying it seems odd. And there are lots of other things that I could cite that seem odd. And there's a lot of oddities in the Bible. How much time have you spent with Christians talking about their personal experiences and the oddities that they've experienced in their lives? A lot.
A lot.
Oh yeah, no, I'm. This is a common thread among Christians, is that a lot of them, maybe even the vast majority, believe because of a firsthand experience that they've had, and like you and your son, is a perfect example. So yeah, I get that. What I'm skeptical about is how you can attribute that to a very specific God, because even if I grant that your son has survived due to some supernatural influence, how do we know that supernatural influence was Jesus and not, I don't know, loci or Vishnu, or pick your favorite god from the Egyptian pantheon.
Was anyone praying to Vishnu? I don't think so.
Well, okay. So Do you think you have to be praying to the right God for God to intercede? I mean, Lokai is a trickster, right? His goal is to sow chaos in the world. So I could
Mhm.
see him intervening, even if you're not praying to him, in for the specific purpose of misleading you from the truth, of tricking you into thinking that
Yeah,
Jesus is real when he's not,
and
right?
we could all be hooked up to the Matrix in a Matrix machine.
Sure.
Yeah, yes, these things are possible, but we kind of do path of least resistance when we're deciding on reality, right?
Okay. So what could imagine actually doing a controlled experiment where you have some people praying to Jesus and other people praying to, I don't know, Allah or Vishnu, or pick your favorite control
Right.
god, um, and other people not praying at all, and comparing the outcomes.
We could maybe, if one of my other children gets cancer or something, we could do it controlled.
There are plenty of cancer victims
So
already available. We don't have to wait for your kids
I'm going to
to.
tell you, God has favorites. God has favorites.
He certainly seems
So
to.
Saul, uh, he takes alive people that he's told to kill. He's called out. He repents. He asks God for forgiveness. God rejects his pleas. David does the same stuff. God forgives him. Why? Because God liked David more than he liked Saul.
Sure. But this is why I'm saying we should have a group. Have more than one test subject. Have a large group of test subjects,
Mm-hmm.
and just see if we can discern a difference between praying to Jesus
Right.
and praying to somebody else. Would that? Do you think that would be an
Possible.
experiment worth doing?
I think they've run it's very similar experiments to that.
I don't know if any of this had a proper control case of praying to a different deity.
Mm-hmm. It
But do
would
you
be an
think that's
interesting thing. I don't know if it would be super fruitful
well?
because
What do you think? What would you expect the outcome of that to be?
I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. Again, the
I'm
whole Bible
surprised that you would not say.
the whole Bible is people accusing God of shirking his duties and trying to prompt God into action. And so there's been entire times when the righteous are wiped out, righteous die, and they are persecuted for hundreds of years. The wicked are prospering, and God is being called to account. It's like these things happen.
What makes God worthy of praise and worship then?
Well, his character is
I mean, he seems like kind of a jerk. Talk
yeah,
about his character.
in certain parts of the Bible, yeah, he doesn't treat Ezekiel very well. Jeremiah cries out to him. It's like, God, you're he uses kind of like a word for like raping me, and God is strong-headed. God in the Bible has he's very justice concerned, justice orientated. He could flash in anger, like when people are talking to God, they say, God, don't push me in your anger, cool down a little bit before you do anything. These are all like character traits.
Yeah, well, he seems like a human.
Yeah.
But if he's just a human with superpowers, why should we worship him?
Well, for practical reasons, if you want to inherit a restored earth, that's a very good practical reason to
Okay,
do so.
so pure selfishness.
That's not what I'm arguing. I'm just that's just one reason why someone should.
Okay, I'm surprised that was the first thing you went to. Then, what
Well,
else?
that's the normal
Is
thing.
there a more noble reason that we should?
If you like his character, you care about who he is, you want a relationship with him. These are all good reasons to. If he is the true God who created the universe, and that should be a reason in itself to do so.
Okay, so let's talk about that. is he the true God, and how do you know?
Well, I think so. I think he is the true God because, again, we go back to Genesis. I think that we have evidence to show that Genesis is more or less an accurate account of the history of creation.
On what basis do you say that?
Well, we'll talk about carbon-14 found in dinosaur bones and in diamonds, placing the
Okay.
Earth's age at a lot less than typical secular accounts of the age of the universe.
Okay, this is good. This was about the time I wanted to segue into
Okay.
YEC.
Yeah.
So let's officially end the open theism part of the discussion and open the YEC, young Earth creationism part of the discussion.
Okay.
Which is also really interesting to me because most of the YECs that I've talked to come to it from the opposite direction than you seem to have. Most of them start by accepting the Bible as the word of God, and then concluding that young Earth creationism is true as a logical consequence of that. Mm-hmm. But you seem to have done the opposite. You say that you've looked at the science, and the science has caused you to believe in YEC, and that has caused you to believe in the reliability of Genesis, right?
Yes.
And you're the first person I've ever met whose reasoning has gone in that direction. And that's particularly interesting because the mainstream scientific position is very solidly against you. You know that, right?
Yeah, and we talked about institutional bias. And so I have a podcast where I go over the plague of credentialism, which talks about rampant bias and how it infects higher institutions in all areas, anthropology, in economics, in archaeology. This is just a normal human problem that we deal with, is institutionalized capture by ideologues.
Sure. But you don't go so far as to say that this bias extends into NASA, and that all of the photographs of showing around Earth are photoshopped, and so you stop short of extending that conspiracy to the round Earth.
Yeah, one of the NASA astronauts who went into space brought what was a young Earth creation science textbook into outer space. Like, they get limited ability of what they could actually bring into space, and he chose to bring Walt Brown's book into space with him.
Yeah, I guarantee you he didn't actually bring the book. He might have brought a thumb drive with the book on it, but the actual book, but as somebody who used to work for NASA, I can tell you with 100% confidence, there's anything that heavy, it has to be approved, and that would not have been approved. But that's neither here nor there. There's no question that there are astronauts who are YECs. Not very many, but there are some. Still, you have concluded that mainstream science is wrong about the origin of the universe, but not about the current mechanics of it, and in particular the shape of the Earth.
Okay, so
why you go against the mainstream science in the one case and not the other?
Well, why would I argue for a flat Earth?
Okay, because it's biblical.
So here, we've already established that that's not my metric or whatever.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so Will Duffy, my friend from Denver, did the final experiment. He is able to fly a bunch of flat earthers down to Antarctica, show them the 24-hour sun that goes all the way around their head, so that which is not possible in a flat Earth model. This is something that you could go and you can test, you can experiment, you can replicate. Recreating the Big Bang or something like that is not something that you can do that with. We have models, and models are meant to explain data, and models definitely can be wrong. And so in economics, we have all these fancy models. We had we had all these economists telling us during the inflationary years of Biden's printing money that we're not going to get inflation because of their idiotic Keynesian models. And guess what we got? We had rampant inflation. Their models are just models that could only explain the data sets that they push into, and they're able to adjust these models to say whatever they want. But
Okay.
it's fake. You print money, you're going to get inflation.
Okay. But let's stay away from economics because
it's illustrative.
Okay, but
it's illustrative of a larger problem that's institutionalized.
Okay, but let's start from the common ground, which is that we agree that the Earth is round, and push out from there and see if we can figure out exactly where things diverge here. So, do you believe that the sun is 93 million miles away?
Sure, I'll go with whatever you say.
Okay, that's not quite the resounding.
Well, I don't know. Whatever Wikipedia says, I'm fine with. Doesn't matter.
Well, Wikipedia says that evolution is true, and that the Earth and that
Right,
the universe is 13 billion years old. So
yeah,
somewhere between the round Earth and the age of the universe, you're going to start to disagree with Wikipedia, and I want to
disagree with a lot of what Wikipedia. It's also intellectually hijacked.
Okay, but I want to find out where the divergence starts.
Right.
And in particular, what I'm going to get to is Wikipedia is going to tell you that there are stars that we can see that are more than 10,000 light years away.
Okay, so how do we know this? How do we know it takes 10,000 years for light to travel?
So we measure the speed of light. Do you believe we can measure the speed of light?
Sure, but we talked about this, and we don't actually know how light behaves in deep space, and it's not like we have one of these stars that you say is 10,000 light years away that we have sent a signal to that is reflected to us that took 20,000 years to do, right?
That's true, but we have a pretty good understanding of what light. Let me back up a step. Do you believe in the theory of electromagnetism?
Sure. I'm good with whatever you say about electromagnetism.
Do you believe that light is an electromagnetic wave?
Is light a wave or a particle? I understand that it behaves differently or could be modeled as either.
Okay, but that light, specifically visible light, is the same kind of thing as, say, a radio wave or a microwave or an X-ray, just with a different wavelength. Do you believe that? Because you'll find that in Wiki. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you believe in electromagnetism.
Mm-hmm.
So you believe in, have you ever heard of Maxwell's equations?
Oh, I've heard of them. I'm not an expert on that.
Okay, so Maxwell's equations are the math that describe the behavior of electromagnetic waves.
Okay,
and if you crunch those equations, one of the things that pops out is that these waves travel at a certain speed. So there's a theoretical prediction of what the speed of light should be, and when you measure it, the result is that the speed of light in a vacuum is exactly what this theoretical prediction says it should be.
That's interesting. That's, you say that. In the theory of relativity, as someone approaches a black hole, what happens?
So, first of all, black holes are general relativity, and so far all I'm talking about is electromagnetism and special relativity. I'm going to try to stay away from general relativity because that's a deep rabbit hole.
Well, here's the thing. Do you have an experiment where we've sent light to one of these distant stars and then timed its return to us to figure out how long or how fast the light gets there and back?
No, of course not. But we have done that with closer objects like the moon. We do that regularly.
Right. And so my original statement to you back when we were talking offline is like, we just don't know how light functions deep into outer space. And
but there's also no reason to suppose that it functions any differently out there than it does here, is there?
Okay, that's a very big assumption.
So the assumption is just that the laws of physics don't change as you move around, because anything other than that is just special pleading. If you're going to postulate, if you're going to allow the possibility that the laws of physics could be different, could suddenly change if you get far enough away from Earth, now you can explain anything, right?
Okay, so in general relativity, does light behave the same at all time?
Yes, in fact, that's one of the postulates of general relativity. Relativity in general is that the measured speed of light is the same for all observers, and the reason for believing that that's true is because it's a logical consequences of the laws of electrodynamics, and those we can test very rigorously here on Earth, and they seem to be the same. Within our solar system, we can test them.
So you have a model.
Everywhere.
You have a model, and the model seems to work in our controlled relative environment. And so you want me to adopt your model, assume your model.
The space between here and the moon is not controlled. It's just space.
So, yeah, so you have a model that works relatively well for the things that we experience.
Not just relatively well, extraordinarily well, to such extreme precision that we can actually send spacecraft to land them on other planets.
Right. So again, it's like you want me to accept this model. You want me to accept that this model applies deep space where there's nothing around.
Because part of the regime where we've actually tested it includes, I don't know what you consider deep space, but it includes space within our solar system.
Yeah.
And now outside of our solar system, we actually have a couple of spacecraft that have left the solar system, and they're still behaving according to exactly the way we expect. And let me just give you an example of the kind of detail here. The way we know where these spacecraft are is not because we can actually see them. They're way too far away for that. We measure with extreme precision the frequency of the radio waves that they're sending back to Earth. And the very tiny changes in that frequency is called the Doppler shift. That tells us the relative speed with which they're moving, and then we can back solve from that to figure out their position. And we know that the answer is correct because we can send them commands. And in order to do that, you have to take this very large directional antenna and point it exactly to where the spacecraft is in order to get enough power in the signal. And then the spacecraft responds.
Okay.
So there is a lot of evidence that these models work everywhere.
Okay.
Let me ask you a different question. We're coming up on an hour here, and I for the sake of making these things watchable, I try to keep it the length between an hour and a half. Would you be, and actually let me back up a step because you mentioned Will Duffy. Yeah. You know, Will Duffy is having a series.
I've seen him, but so a lot of that is just story making by evolutionists.
Let me just finish what's going on for the sake of the audience, because I know you know what I'm talking about, but the audience doesn't. So Will Duffy is doing a series of videos with a biologist named Erica, who goes by the YouTube handle of Gutsick Gibbon. Where she got that, I'm not quite sure. But, so she's teaching him evolution. And would you be interested / willing in doing something similar with me about electrodynamics and relativity and maybe even quantum mechanics if we get to that?
Depending on my time commitment, I could probably do something like that. That would be interesting.
Okay.
Before you cut us off, like I'm not super studied in all lights and electromechanics. One of my things that I pointed out to you as something for you to think about was the carbon-14, the carbon dating of both dinosaur bones and diamonds. I don't know if we talked about carbon-14 found in diamonds, but these things are dated, and they're dated less than evolutionary time frame scales.
Yep.
Have you given thought to those? those aspects.
So I did actually look at the references that you sent me, and none of them were attributed to anything. So one of them was a Google Doc with just a list of claims, discoveries of
they had all the
dinosaur
sources
fossils.
listed on it.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
maybe I need to go back and have another look.
So when we're finding these dinosaur bones, a lot of times they're not fossils; that they're actual carbon type material that you can send into the lab yourself and do the dating and get results back. One of the links that I sent you was very telling about the nature and character of intellectual integrity in evolutionists, in which Bob Enyart had offered a scholarship or grant of like $24,000 for them to carbon date the soft dinosaur tissue, and Jack Horner specifically refused, and he refused on the grounds that it might give ammunition to young Earth creationists.
I watched that video. I actually had the privilege of meeting Jack Horner many years ago, back when he was at when the idea that birds were essentially dinosaurs, when that was still at the forefront of science. Now it's pretty much accepted. He's an interesting guy, but he's a scientist. He's not well practiced at dealing with young Earth creationists.
Right.
And he did not handle that as well as I would have hoped him to.
It's not about handling. It's like, just take the money, do the experiment, and accept the results.
Well, no, there's the problem is, and this is what I wish he had said something more like this. It's unfortunately not quite that simple, because in order for the results to be meaningful, you have to establish a lot more background knowledge than we actually have. And in particular, you have to establish that the organic material that you found in these fossils is actually part of the original dinosaur and not contamination that came in from some other source later.
Yeah, I think that they've ruled that it is original biological material. And for our sake of discussion right now, just assume it is. How would that affect your worldview?
Well, if that were actually true, then it would be interesting. I'd need to look into it more. If that claim really held up, it would totally rock my worldview. But I'm very confident that if we dig into it, it will not hold up. But yeah, I'm happy to dig into something like that with you on the condition, because this is going to be time consuming.
I'm glad you said that, because most evolutionists I talk to, like, they don't even blink when I tell them these things. And when I say, hey, we're finding carbon-14 in diamonds, this shouldn't be there. We're finding carbon-14 in dinosaur bones, in dinosaur soft tissue, that shouldn't be there.
Yep.
And they don't even blink. And so it's very cathartic to find someone who actually understands that this is like real serious. If this stuff is actually true.
Oh yeah.
With serious implications.
If it's true, it would be big news.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm very confident that it's not true. But yeah, I'm willing to take it serious. So this is part of my project of understanding these points of view, is to do the occasional deep dive and either figure out what's gone wrong, or alternatively, and this would be a fine outcome for me, to be on the vanguard of some major scientific discovery.
Yeah.
I'll give you long odds against that outcome, but I'm happy either way. The thing that I want to avoid is, because these deep dives are time consuming, they require a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And what I find is that a lot of YECs are very disingenuous. And when someone does a deep dive, because people do these deep dives occasionally, in fact, the entire scientific community, that is their job, to do deep dives on this. The young Earth creationist community does not accept those results. They go on to the next thing and the next thing. And they are very intellectually dishonest by and large. I don't. This is why I wanted to stipulate that I'm willing to do this deep dive with you on the condition that if it goes my way,
Yeah,
that you will change your mind.
true. But it can't be just story making. And
Oh,
so,
of course. No,
for
you got to.
example, soft dinosaur tissue, original biological material, should not exist. And so once it was found to exist, the evolutionist community, I'm going to use these words, even though some people don't like.
That's fine.
They said, "Oh, this stuff can last this long because it's infused with iron." But it turns out iron actually increases the decay process. Their just so story was like an opposite of reality, and it became a talking point for them to dismiss it without any evidence that this would actually be something that works.
Okay. I'm happy to do this deep dive with you. It's outside my area of expertise.
Yeah.
So it's going to be quite a bit of work for me, and I'm going to have to try to enlist some actual experts to help out. It's going to be a process.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to undertake that with you.
So carbon-14 in dinosaur bones and in diamonds and soft biological material. And then we'll do study on the speed of light.
Okay.
That'll be very interesting.
Cool. You got a deal.
Okay.
So we still have a little bit more time if there's something else you would like to talk about, or we could wrap it here and take that action item for next time.
So absolutely. You were talking about your confusion with Calvinists. Well, my latest thing that I've been spending ungodly amounts of time doing is compiling original source documents from Calvin's lifetime about Calvin and his interaction in Geneva. And so if anyone is interested in those types of things, what an absolute psychopath, like Stalinist that Calvin was, my latest books are compiling.
Tell us what you really think.
The man was a psychotic megalomaniac. His word is God. Any attack on him is attack on God. He would haul people into his tribunal over every criticism of him. He'd get up and leave dinner parties if you criticize one thing about his theology. If you said he was a hothead, you'd never preach again in the city. So absolutely. And I think it's important. And I think it's important more than historically. Like I care a lot about people. So what I watch for, like in these interactions, I watch for signs of intellectual integrity. And so if I mention something to you about carbon-14, you see your reaction, see if it actually registers, to see if you actually are honest about the topic. And so when I'm doing these things about Calvin, it's more about the Calvinists who are defending this guy in the modern day. They're defending someone who's an absolute psychopath, and they do so cult-like religiously. They fall in line with all these crazy apologetics for this guy.
Okay.
And so I do think it's an interesting subject. I think it's interesting in just anthropological way, like how people function, how people think, and how people form beliefs, and how people interact with information. I think those types of topics are very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very interested in them too. And you also strike me as somebody who approaches these things with intellectual honesty, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, because it's really interesting that two people who approach the same world with the same intellectual honesty should end up in two such completely different places.
Oh, you have my book. Open it up and go to an open letter to myself and read that whole chapter. And it's all about how people can come to different conclusions using the same data, and how the data can fit multiple models. And then it has a whole section about intellectual integrity and things of that nature.
I don't see an open letter to myself in the table of contents.
Let me go pull it up.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Chapter 1. Okay.
And so if you want insight into my mindset about intellectual integrity, it's there in that chapter.
Okay.
So,
well, unless there's something else, why don't we call that a wrap, and we'll reconvene after we've both done a little homework. And
let me know.
Okay. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And that's a wrap.